Okay, so you're gonna take your 5-year plan and you're just gonna, you got other options. That's what we're gonna talk about. I'm Danielle, and today we are talking about why you need to ditch the 5-year plan for your career. This is a very traditional tool. It is old school, and I just think that 5-year plans are dead. The fact of the matter is, no one really wants to make one. It's kind of difficult to figure out exactly what's gonna happen in 5 years. That feels like a really long time from now, at least for me. Life is unpredictable, and even if you kind of have an idea of what you want, if you execute on that plan, after a year, it may already have changed. So this is the kind of tool that I do not find so helpful, and I feel like we really need an alternative, because you don't want to also have no idea of what you're aiming for, but you don't really want to map out this like concrete plan, 5-page document that's like, this is what the next 5 years of my life needs to look like. That feels constricted. No plan at all feels very up in the air. So now that we've established the normal way of career planning is difficult and boring, I have an alternative. Since 2016 or 2017, I've been using this one exercise that has been a million times better than that traditional, difficult, boring 5-year plan. And it comes from a book called Designing Your Life. Let me just take a moment to appreciate how many times I've mentioned this book in my different videos. It's honestly one of my favorites of all time. I come back to it again and again. I've said it before and I will say it again. I love the book Designing Your Life. I always talk about the book Designing Your Life. The book Designing Your Life, here it actually is. I found this book that changed my life, Designing Your Life. Who wrote the book Designing Your Life? That book Designing Your Life and the book Designing Your Life. I feel like I've mentioned it 1,000 times now. And there's one particular exercise that I would highly recommend called Odyssey Planning. And this is really about mapping out all the different alternatives, building your way forward, knowing that life needs to be flexible, and that if you just come up with one specific plan, it's going to restrict you, versus if you come up with all these different possibilities and you map them out in a way that's visual and creative, you're actually going to get better results than if you are just typing away on a Google Doc and marrying that plan for the next 5 years. So I'm very excited because this morning I am taking some time to build out my next Odyssey plans. And I did this about every 6 months, just when I feel like I need it and when I feel like I want to kind of reconnect with that vision of the future. And while the word vision sounds very lofty, it's just like, what picture of the future feels exciting to me, and what different paths could I take to get there, and looking at which one I connect with most. So that is what we're gonna do today, and I will explain exactly how you can create Odyssey plans if you're trying to figure out what's going on in your career, figure your life out, and you're not exactly sure what the next stage of your career might look like. So let's go. In the spirit of going outside of our traditional way of doing things, instead of sitting at my desk over there with my laptop, I am sitting on the floor with a little floor desk and paper and pen. So how does one create an Odyssey plan? Well, funny you should ask. I have the book Designing Your Life right here. And if we pop it open, there's sort of a visual of what this Odyssey plan might look like. Now, first thing to acknowledge is we're actually gonna create multiple Odyssey plans, because again, you're not restricting yourself to one path, mapping out the different possibilities. We've got sort of this timeline style thing with all these doodles. There's like a mountain and a hockey stick. So you're creating these visual representations because it actually helps your brain think differently about it. And then we've got these different gauges so you can kind of like score it based on the resources that you have to go down this path, how much you like it, your confidence level that you could actually accomplish this, and the coherence, meaning like how relevant is it to you and what feels true for you. You've got a title for it and 3 different questions about what you might need to look into in order to pursue this path. Essentially, this is what yours might look like. something like this. And so just for a general visual, this is my last Odyssey plan. I think I made it about 8 months ago at the beginning of 2021. It's somewhat visual. It's kind of got these different paths and pursuing different things and when different things start and end. And I try to like doodle a little brain and hearts and like, I don't know what that is. But this is what yours may look like with kind of the timeline and how things are progressing and different endeavors that you might pursue at different times. The most important thing that you need to know is just that you're building your way forward. That's kind of the main concept of this book, is you just keep forging forward and clarifying as you go. And the actual process doesn't need to be perfect. Your different Odyssey plan options don't need to be perfect. It just needs to be clarifying for you to go through that process. Meaning if you learn a little something while you're doodling these out, then you're on the right track. So I actually started this the other night and I had to put it down because it was kind of late at night, but I can kind of tell you where it might be helpful to start. First off, just let this be messy. Just jot down anything that comes on your mind and get it all down, and then you can kind of like build out and doodle your plans. But what I find helpful personally, so I have had a lot of different parts of my career. I went from a full-time job straight out of college in corporate communications, then I ended up getting involved in a startup, and then I took on a bunch of different gigs and stuff until I had 5 different jobs. By the way, I recorded this whole process, so if you want to see my life when I had 5 jobs, I actually have a video that you can check out. Pretty crazy. But that kind of talks about the gig life and whatnot, which was a part of my career at a certain stage. And then now I have a full-time job again that I've had for about 1.5 years, and I've been doing a couple of gigs on the side. And those have been kind of ever-changing just with like the pandemic and everything. So what I find helpful for me, since I have like a very multifaceted career, like if you've like been in that gig life or are interested in a side gig and stuff like that, I start by thinking of like different ways that my career could look like structurally, if that makes sense. Like, oh, do I just want to have a full-time job, or do I want to do these different gigs or somewhere in between? Or do I want to keep with this full-time job and start this side gig? So like thinking about the structure of your life and what like feels in integrity with what you want is a good place to start if you don't have a traditional looking career, I guess you could say. You may have a more traditional looking career and you just want a full-time job and you don't want a bunch of stuff outside of that because that's what works for you. And in that case, you might find it most helpful to pick the starting point of these 3 potential industries or job roles or something like that. And maybe you need to do a little research up front to figure out what makes the most sense for you or what you want to look into. But even if you don't know that much about an industry and you're just like, hey, what if I went into this? That's totally cool. Again, you're building your way forward with this. You're learning a little something in the process of mapping this out, and that's really all you need at this stage. So what works for me is just kind of like scribbling out, and for me, like starting with that career format is helpful, but if you want to start with industry or job titles, go for that. And just sort of like write down random stuff. You can do like a mind map, or you could just like jot down a list, but just start with like different possibilities, just anything that comes to mind about what you might want to include in these different plans, whether they're together or in separate plans, and just put it all down. Now mine are going to be very career focused, but like if you have things personally, like starting a family or travel or anything like that, feel free to actually include that because that may be relevant to the type of a job that you have. So consider that as well. So after you've got your list or your scribbles and you have enough content for maybe like 3 to 5 different options, different plans, take a few different pieces of paper. You can do this in a notebook too, but I like to kind of like spread it out, and you just want to draw like a square and divide it into like 5 different sections to represent 5 years. Again, this is different than a 5-year plan, but you're creating this visual timeline. The last thing I'll say before we get going with this is do not worry about if you're not a good drawer. Like, honestly, my stick figure game is weak right now, and it doesn't even matter as long as you know what your doodle is. I don't know what that is. Like I said, when you draw, you just think differently than when you're like typing a list or something like that. So it's going to help you think outside the box and come up with different possibilities. Honestly, put on some good music, walk around your house, dance around your house, whatever you need to do to hype yourself up and get the creative juices flowing. That is probably gonna make the results better, so it's totally worth it. Let's see what comes out of this. be completely honest, I'm experiencing a little bit of a creative block, so I'm gonna go for a walk. That rhymed. And then I'll get right back to it. I've done this plenty of times before when I'm just like feeling kind of a little stuck and honestly getting a little bit of cabin fever in my apartment. I'll go on a walk, I'll have like a notes page on my phone, and just like as I'm walking, maybe like listening to music, I'll just like jot down any ideas or words or thoughts that I want to come back to. And honestly, just getting your blood pumping sometimes is the best way to get through sort of just that creative block. And then usually you've got some material to work with after that. Okay, so I just want to take this sweaty moment. It's very humid outside and in the probably high 80s. But I just want to take this moment to talk about, like, as you're starting to think about different, you know, ideas or different paths for yourself, like, how do you know what your gut is saying about those things? And I have worked on this a lot the last couple years. I'm still working on it, but I've kind of noticed it's like, it's a little feeling of like, when you think about that thing, either you like tighten inside and you kind of feel like dread, or you feel like this expansion and this relaxation of like, ooh. You'll notice like either one of those two feelings, like it might just be like a little physical like sensation like in your gut area or like in your middle of your torso. Like that's how I feel it. It's just like a subtle little physical signal of either expansion or closing in, and that's what I've noticed about trusting my gut in thinking about different paths for myself. Okay, so now that I'm all sweaty, we're back at it, and I'm very dehydrated. Actually, funny story. Last night before I was about to go to bed, I was like pouring myself a cup of water, but I decided it would be a good idea to like pour it from the water filter in the pitch black. I don't know why, I just walked in my kitchen in the dark and I couldn't see anything and I decided to do it. And I was pouring it and it started like spilling all over the counter and I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I just missed the cup. And then I put it in again, the same thing happened. I realized that the cup was already full. So I had to clean that up. Anyways, on a more relevant note, I did take some notes during the walk. That's kind of what you saw me typing out when I was sitting by the lake. Yeah, I ended up just kind of writing random things about like the impact that I wanted to have, what my different interests were, what a big question it is to think like, what do you want to do with your life? So anyways, it was kind of just a brain dump, which is definitely the point. Yeah, if you ever feel like blocked mentally, whether you're like trying to do any sort of creative endeavor or you're trying to figure your life out, I highly recommend just going on a walk and just like jotting down anything that comes to your mind, because it kind of just gets the ball rolling. But now that we're back, I am gonna get back to my Odyssey planning, because that's, you know, the whole point of this video. And I'm saying all this basically to just say, if you're like feeling stuck or if you don't know what to do, that's like so normal, and maybe take a walk or just like sort of get all your ideas down. Don't worry about if they're good or not. Build out Odyssey plans. Don't worry about if they're like good or not. And eventually you'll realize something, because the whole point of this process is to just like bring new insights and not necessarily to, again, have like this flawless plan all mapped out. That's the whole reason that the 5-year plan is intimidating. So let's get back to doodling and see what comes from it. Snack break. All right, I would say that that was a success. I did come up with one that I liked. It's somewhat similar to one from the past that I've come up with, but I built out other ones that were like a little bit too complicated. I'm guilty of wanting to do all the things. You know, I have to kind of reel it in. I did my best, as I said, to like doodle and stuff, even though this is probably like the worst drawing of a phone that I've ever seen in my life. It looks like a macaroni noodle, but that's besides the point. So I'll tell you what I learned from this, and then you can kind of go through the same process once you build out a few options, a couple of which you might like or one of which you might like. I can just look at this and basically say, okay, I noticed that I kind of felt that like, ooh, that I was talking about earlier, a dream that I've had that I put on here. One day I want to create my own strengths assessment. So I do work with strengths assessments right now, and I use somebody else's, like I was trained under them and there's like a licensing fee and stuff. But one day I do want to create my own because I have all kinds of ideas for that and I've really benefited from them and see kind of a gap there. And I also feel like this was a good balance of variety, which is really important to me in my career and in my life, but not so much where I like look at it and I feel overwhelmed. Like I remember when I was doing Odyssey plans, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and I had mapped out this one that was like so many different parts, like so many different gigs, more than even when I had those 5 jobs. And I looked at it and I was like already overwhelmed. And so I was like, okay, too much, take a step back. And so, you know, it's good to know like, how do you actually feel when you look at that doodled timeline? Do you feel overwhelmed? Do you feel excited? Do you feel interested or curious? Just sort of like notice that internal feeling and note it, maybe even write it down, because that's kind of that gut instinct that's going to tell you like, is this a direction that I want to go? Do I want to look deeper into following this path? So to review, if you're trying to figure your life out, what your career is going to look like in the future, and just sitting there with a blank Word document sounds terrifying, ditch the 5-year plan and follow these steps to use Odyssey plans to help you get clarity. 1, you want to just jot down a bunch of notes. You can do it on a notes page on your phone while you're walking. You can just take a blank piece of paper and just scribble all kinds of ideas of interests, industries, things that you've done in the past you want to get back to, or anything that comes to mind, like the structure of what you want your career to look like. Just jot down these different things, how you want to have an impact on people, how you want to show up in the world, anything and everything. Just get it down on paper, even if it's messy. Mine's obviously a mess right here. I have like 7 different pieces of paper. Used a whole tree trying to figure this out, but don't worry, I'll recycle. After that, you want to narrow it down into like 3 to 5 different options. So whether that is breaking it down by industry or structure of your career, or these different options that you see fit, these 3 to 5 different plans, you can translate that into basically a piece of paper with different sections. Take some time, doodle it out, map it out. You can even use those like gauges that I told you about at the beginning to see if it's like a fit, if you like it, if you have the confidence you can do it, if you have the resources to be able to pursue that. And remember that you can also make it as life versus career focused as you want. You could totally include both career and life if you know you want to travel a lot. I know I used that example before. You may want to consider that as you're picking out the career for the future. So integrate as much personal stuff as you want as you're painting the picture of what your career will look like as well. And then take a look at all the plans that you've created and notice what you feel when you see them, and write it down, record it in some way, because if you feel uncomfortable, if you feel like nervous but excited, that's probably like an outside of your comfort zone option. That's probably what you want. And when you listen to your gut knows the answer. So I hope that that is helpful and that you try out Odyssey Planning. I'll put the link to the book Designing Your Life if you're interested in checking that out in the description bar. So scroll down if you're interested. And we will wrap it up there. If you want more examples of different times that I've used Odyssey Planning to come to some conclusions about my future career, I'll put some other videos that I've done on this topic in the description bar below as well. And we will leave it at that. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you like these kinds of topics, definitely click the thumbs up so I know what you like to see and what you want to see more of. And click subscribe so that you get more videos from me in your feed about career design and figuring your life out and all that good stuff. All right, I hope that you have a wonderful day. Bye.